Good afternoon, distinguished guests. It's a pleasure to be here in Singapore and deliver this lecture. But I would like to, not to disappoint you, but I'm just a simple chemist from Brookline, Massachusetts. I'm not a nuclear engineer. But I had to study nuclear engineering because I went and specialized on special branch of chemistry, which is called radiochemistry. The chemist who deals with the radioactive materials, and that's how I ended up with the nuclear safety, security and safeguards, and did my thesis on chemistry of plutonium and uranium, which are somewhat exotic, but at that time they were important. And I remember in the very early in my career I had to take a lecture, also in nuclear engineering to understand these things, and we had a very colorful professor. His name was Olli. And one of the students asked him that, Professor, now that you are the professor of nuclear engineering, tell me how important is nuclear energy. So he said that, look, you have to, I can describe it to you in such a way that if you look at the history of mankind, which is a straight line which goes thousands of years and it's all dark, and then somewhere there, 90, 50, 60, there is a tiny small flash of light. That was the nuclear energy in the historical concept, because it lives only 50 years or 100 years, and then new methods will come. And I will never forget his explanation, because nuclear energy, we need to remember, it's a servant and not a master, and we need to approach it in that way. Today I was thinking to talk a little bit to start with this ASEAN context, how I see nuclear developments in this geographical area, then talk a little bit more about the role of ASEAN, go then to the IAEA, the services IAEA does and work on this area, then go back to the international cooperation, talk about the emergencies, how to handle them, and some lessons which we have learned from various accidents. And two things from the very beginning in mind. We should be forward-looking, planning for the future, but learn from the lessons of the past, and be proactive to make it safer, and not only learn from the accidents. And the second thing is, this is all about to do with the risk. There is no zero risk in this world. So whatever human being is doing in this area always includes some risk. If we look today, the nuclear energy worldwide, there are more than 400 reactors, I think about 440 by the end of last year, which are able to produce electricity. Worldwide it provides, I think, up to 11% of the electricity, but not energy. It's coming from nuclear power, but it's not evenly distributed. Most of those 440 reactors are in the United States of America, almost 100. After that comes France with close to 70 reactors, then Russia, India, and China, and Japan, and South Korea. They cover practically almost two-thirds of the power reactors of the world. But this picture is going now to change radically. Europe, Northern America is not going to build in the next couple of decades very many new reactors, and the pivot is moving to Asia, particularly India, Pakistan maybe, South Korea and China. China is going to pass in terms of the number of the reactors, United States of America, somewhere in year 2030. So it's a very ambitious program. Whether that will hold, we don't know. I just read yesterday an article which was titled that is the Chinese nuclear program melting down, because there has been certain slowing down, but this is perhaps to do with the economy and some obstacles which they have had with the new types of reactors. So I believe that they are going to continue. But this is particularly going to happen now in the countries which are countries where the energy consumption has been very low. They need new energy sources, they need energy security. There is this climate control, CO2 limits. So many of these Asian countries are going to look for the nuclear energy as part of the solution to their energy requirements. And many of them are here in ASEAN region. You have seen Vietnam, perhaps the most ambitious one. They plan to have 10 years from now 2 reactors up and running of Russian origin. Then another 2 to follow fairly soon if they get the agreement. Thailand is still thinking, Malaysia thinking, and perhaps the next one is Indonesia down there, which has a very long history of nuclear program. All these are going to look for nuclear power plants. Not so much the other facilities like uranium enrichment or reprocessing, which are much more sensitive technologies and which are more associated, for example, with the nuclear non-proliferation. So Asian countries are really looking for electricity production. Indonesia actually has had some small fuel fabrication for the research reactors, but I don't think that fabrication capability is good enough or right type to serve the power plants. Then the other thing which we see in when I look at it, I see very little planning how these countries which are now embarking on nuclear energy, how they are going to handle the radioactive waste. Because you have basically 3 types of waste here. One is those which come from the nuclear research, use of medical isotopes in hospitals, like cobalt sources to treat the cancer, which are very powerful and you need to handle with those. And traditionally most of the countries just store them in the vaults and have not really thought how to dispose them finally. And I think that this is a challenge in the Asian region because these sources, they are still fairly radioactive and they could be, for example, suitable for some terrorist purposes if someone decides to do it. So we need to take care of. Then the next category of wastes is are those wastes which come from the research reactors and power reactors during their routine operation, all kinds of ionizations, water purification, sludges, etc. And then is the spent fuel, which is the most radioactive and is the most problematic. It looks to me that the Vietnamese plan to solve that one by sending this fuel back to Russia, which is, I think, is a good idea because this is part of the contract, so the Russians will take it and you don't need to invest any money. But the others are perhaps not that lucky because, for example, South Korean vendors or European vendors or Japanese reactor vendors, they are very, it's not very likely that they take the spent fuel back. So one has to have a plan from the very beginning. A plan before you even build the first nuclear power plant, how you deal with those kind of wastes, which is a safety concern and to a certain degree also security concern. And you need to have a plan. Actually, you need to collect the funds for this very expensive exercise during the operation of the nuclear power plant, like many countries in Europe do. There's a small levy in the electricity produced, which then goes to the fund. And at the very end, when the nuclear power plant ceases operation after 50, 60 years, you need to dismantle it, you need to do something with the waste, and you need to have funds. So, and these are expensive. If you look today, for example, Eastern Europe, which after the collapse of Soviet Union and dropping down the Iron Curtain, they never collected these monies. So now they have tremendous financial difficulties there in paying these. So I think it's important that in ASEAN, where you start from the kind of clean table, that this is put to the programs from the very beginning. Then the other new development there or thing to consider is this approach that some people, like the Russians, they offer you a nuclear power plant. They construct it, they operate it, and they own it. And this is going to happen now in Bangladesh as a first example. Here one has to think also what to do at the end of this cycle with the reactor. Who is going to dismantle it? The Bangladeshis need to have a very good plan to regulate all this. And I think that this is a novel area. if this is going to happen in some of the ASEAN countries, you need to prepare for that. And then there are new reactor types. There has been a lot of talk about small modular reactors, which are made from units. They are like batteries. Each of those tiny small towers which are there, they produce about 30 to 50 megawatt of electricity. It's enough for 50,000 people. Well, Singapore has 5 million people, so you don't want to have 100 of those. I'm sure it's a big, there one has to look much bigger plant if you want to solve the problems. But for the developing countries, this is a very good system. All the countries where the population is not very dense and a large country, let's say like the US or Russian, Siberian areas. So there, this might be a good solution. Or then a country which is a small and is about to start to need energy. And then are these nuclear, floating nuclear power plants. The concept which has been there since 1960s, but nobody never really built that. But now there are two projects on the way. One in Russia, the reactor is almost ready in St. Petersburg. And the other one, this picture is from the Chinese plan. This is the concept of the artist, so I don't know exactly what it is. And I think the Chinese are thinking to put this particularly to the islands in South China Sea where they need electricity. And I don't think that the IAEA has really kind of set any basic standards for this floating nuclear power plant. So this is entirely new territory. And you really can't compare them also to these military applications like submarines or air carriers, which have huge amounts of energy they use. Like a submarine, the biggest Russian attack submarines, I think they had as much as 150 megawatts. It's a lot of energy. But they go fast, they go deep, and they need it. And air carriers also, they are using huge amount of energy. So this is, I think, is an area where the international community has to work now in the future. But then we have those unfortunate cases of accidents. These are just the three most important 3 Mile Island end of 90s, which shocked first time the international community. Then Chernobyl mid-80s, and most recently Fukushima. And then I added the 9/11 or the terrorist attack to these twin towers in New York, because this was the first time when I think people really started to debate about the vulnerability of these nuclear installations against any terrorism attack or terrorists getting nuclear materials and using them for malicious purposes. And what is common to all those four? They could have been avoided. There are a variety of reasons why these accidents took place. There were problems in designs, there were problems in operation, but there was also problems with the regulations. So they were not all looking all the possibilities and overlooked certain practices. But the good part of that was that all these cases, particularly 3 Mile Island and Fukushima, the countries, in this case US and Japan, they invited the foreign partners to look at the accidents, analyze the accidents, learn the lessons from those so that we don't repeat the same mistakes again and make the nuclear energy more safe. And just as an example, for example, this project which was done in the auspices of the IAEA for Fukushima, there were, I think, about 180 scientists working with this 5-volume thick IAEA document analyzing this, which is, by the way, available on their website. And participation was from more than 40 countries. So when you look at the nuclear energy is only used in 30 countries, so you at the same time expanded the audience to cover the newcomers. And this is also a good lesson for those who want to build their own capacities to see what kind of needs you have for the education, what kind of needs you have for your regulatory bodies, and enhance generally the cooperation. Then I don't think that I will spend too much on this ASEAN current nuclear safety regime, but there are, I think, two things where you can base your cooperation. The first one is this very unique nuclear weapons free zone treaty, which mentions nuclear safety two ways: the safe operation of the facilities, that they are also used for peaceful purposes, and then the handling of the radioactive waste, because I think that people were worried at that point of time that maybe someone plans to dump this waste to sea, which was very common in 1960s and 70s for lower and medium level wastes. And then more recently, the ASEAN Blueprint 2025 vision about the safe use of nuclear energy, and where I think are the right things on one hand, but it's still focusing, I think, more cooperation between regulatory bodies than, for example, between the operators. And this is the difference then when you go to the IAEA or the global nuclear safety regime, because this is like a donut or cake. You know, you have a center part, then you have one round around that, and then you have this outer part. So the core is the safety itself and the infrastructure which needs to be in place. And this is up to each individual state to create that, implement that, using then the standards which are on the second round of this cake: international safety standards, conventions, review and appraisal services, where IAEA sends experts from its member states to check that these things are, you know, handled properly. Operating experience exchange. This may be somewhat unknown to you, but after each of these major accidents, after 3 Mile Island and then Chernobyl, actually two new organizations were created, which were for the nuclear power operators, the ones who run these facilities. The 3 Mile Island accident brought this Institute for Nuclear Power Operators, which is mainly American, but also foreign countries and operators have been participating in that. And then after the Chernobyl accident came World Association of Nuclear Power Operators, which is worldwide, and many countries are participating in that. The difference between those and IAEA is that, first of all, they are much more technical. The second thing is that much of their work is confidential, so you don't see their publication, not their findings. They are not published. That, you know, what kind of recommendation they have done for particular power plant to improve the safety. It's maybe not necessarily good if you are outside and a newcomer, because you don't know what was the problem and how it was solved. And then joint R&D project, codes of conduct. And then you have the outer side, which is more kind of cooperation, scientific type or technical type, various platforms. One of them is Asian Nuclear Safety Network, and there are many others there. Regulatory bodies get together, news media, think tanks, and other networks. So this whole thing is actually quite an impressive, and if you look at globally, it's a tremendous amount of work. And the other day when we were talking with Ken Young, I was just wondering when the people have time to work if they go to all those meetings. But there's a lot of information, but one has to be then very selective and go to the right places to get the right result. And then all this is based on this kind of what nuclear world order, where the IAEA conventions and legal instruments are the basic documents. So we have IAEA safety standards, security guidelines, and this is one thing, you know, what I would like to point out, that until now we have handled nuclear safety and security quite different from each others. This security started to come after the collapse of Soviet Union, mid-90s, but still it's only this nuclear safety summits run from the initiative of President Obama, which brought bigger attention to that, and I know Singapore has been attending those. So it's important now that when those security summits are over, that this baton is carried forward to the practical work, for example, in the auspices of the IAEA. And this is going to be a tough battle, because IAEA has traditionally a limited budget. There is a cake which has been already distributed, and it's very difficult to get additional funding and tasks for an international organization like IAEA. So this December there is a nuclear security conference in the IAEA, and I think that this is an important juncture so that the ministers who go there really assign adequate resources to the IAEA to this end. Or otherwise this effort is just getting, somewhere on the background. And this safety and security, they also compensate each other. And just a very simple example. You have read about the Stuxnet, which was used by some people in Iran to destroy centrifuges. It's a system which was a malware in the software, which took over a thing which is called a frequency converter. Frequency converter puts the centrifuges to spin on certain speed. So what this malware did is that actually it changed the speed, but at the same time it told to the operator that I'm running with a nominal speed, no problem, everything going beautiful. And then the centrifuge was slowing down, going up again, and as a result they got destroyed. In nuclear power plant, the cooling pumps, which are circulating water through the reactor core so that it cools down, doesn't melt, and takes the heat away and turns it to steam and energy, works with the same principle. You have a frequency converter, which is run by the software like in any digital system today. You can do the same there. And therefore this kind of cyber security either comes from outside or, like in case of Iran, it went through internal ways. These are the new challenges which are out there, and I don't think that all these safety standards, in my personal view, are yet up to that level, and these are one of those tasks which the international community has in front, because everything today is actually digital control. We don't have any more this kind of analog system where you take a valve and you slowly turn it to the full speed. And then we have the national and regional safety and security infrastructure, and regulators and operators. And this system works also such a way that when you come to this nation like Singapore or Vietnam, actually you have a three-level system. One is there in this box are the operators, and they are actually in charge of the safety and safe operational facility. They are the ones who are in charge that all the international codes and practices are implemented, that the plant is safe. If there is an emergency, they are the first ones who are to handle the emergency. Then you have a regulator on top of that, whose job is to independently to verify and make sure that this operator does what his codes of conduct, instructions, design specifications have stipulated. And then on top of that you have a governmental overview which makes sure that the regulator does it, but the government has to do a few other things. Has to provide the funding for the regulator, has to make sure that it can work independently, and it has adequate resources and staff to do their job. And then I think that on top of that, since we live now in a new world, as Ban Ki-moon said after the Fukushima accident anywhere is an accident everywhere, or has an impact everywhere. So we are not anymore alone. So I feel that there needs to be more international control so that the individual states implement those which they codes and agreements which they have agreed to. And this will be difficult because you hit the national sovereignty and other things and prestige. But I think that in the 21st century we need to walk towards that direction. And if you look, aviation industry actually has done it. You can't fly an airplane just like that to Singapore. You know, if Singapore government has said that these airplanes from this country are not safe. So it's the same principle, and this was not there 20 years ago or 30 years ago in aviation industry, but due to the accidents, those came. And then a little bit about the organizations which are on that diagram which I showed. Just quickly through. These are the international intergovernmental organizations which are involved with the nuclear safety. It's OECD, Nuclear Energy Agency, then a couple of other committees. I don't think Singapore is actually, oh, now you are a member of International Energy Agency, I think, from very recent. So, and then the system uses a lot of this European Union institutes as a support there, and also same from the US. And then there are these UN bodies which set standards for radiation exposure, which are the most highest allowable radiation doses per person, and they are reviewing those standards all the time. I think that IRP is perhaps the most, and OnScale are the most prominent. And then you have the various other networks. I mentioned most of them already. And then when you come to the actual implementation, there are a lot of IAEA standards available, which are good. They are not written just by the IAEA staff. It's not the bureaucrat sitting in a tower in Vienna and writing this. These are actually documents which are result of the consensus of international experts. So every booklet there has gone through a tremendous scrutiny based on actual experiences and then approved in the IAEA system. So you have the fundamentals of the top, then the basic requirements, and very individual guidelines. A lot of to read, you get to that. But this gives a good start for the system. And then let's walk quickly through the conventions and where we stay from the ASEAN point. The core is this Convention on Nuclear Safety, which is legally binding, even though there is no verification, but whichever state signs to that, it's legally binding. And it's for non-land-based nuclear power plants in order to have the safety measures up to the international standards. And if we look at the situation in ASEAN, the status as 23rd of April doesn't mean that I was lazy in going back to the, but this is the last time when there was a change to the list of countries. So it's in force in Cambodia, Indonesia, Philippines, signed it, Singapore and Vietnam. So I think that if we look now like Malaysia and Thailand, I think they should work, and I think that now that Thailand has a new atomic energy law, probably they will go ahead with this. But there's a lot of work, I think, on this area in Asia. And I also remind, I didn't mention that Cambodia actually signed last week a nuclear cooperation agreement with Russia, so they are planning to do something as well. Then is the joint convention, which is important for the safety of spent fuel management and also safety of radioactive waste. And this is radioactive waste, not only nuclear, so not only uranium or plutonium, but any radionuclides you use. And this is not overly flourishing situation because many of these countries actually have substantial amount of wastes, and some of them even have spent fuel and nuclear waste. And one thing which I probably should have highlighted in the previous is actually this is standard for land-based reactors. If we get those floating nuclear power plants, they need to come with some other standards and recommendations. Probably most of these things apply for that, but there are additional things to do with the security, emergency arrangements when your power plant is floating in on shore or even high seas. And then it's a convention on the physical protection of nuclear material. Here, I think we are somewhat better off. And we need to keep in mind that even if you don't have nuclear material in your country, there will be transportation through the ships or through airplanes. Radionuclides for medical purposes are flown all the time. I think even past the Changi airport. If not touching ground, they go over you from Indonesia to destinations. And then nuclear fuel is shipped from South Korea to Middle East. They pass probably the Straits. So this is important, and particularly with the amendment which puts, this comes after the September 11. So there are much more requirements for security than in the previous year. And I think that there is quite a lot of ASEAN countries to do. Then here we are fairly well, in conventional assistance in case of nuclear accident or radiological emergency. We see that practically most of the countries have signed, ratified it, that's in force, and same is also notifications, which are equally important. Notification is important in that sense that if you have an accident, you are obliged to tell not only to the IAEA but to your neighboring countries and share the information so that they can prepare themselves if they need to do their measures either on their soil or to protect their nationals which are there, like was the case in Japan when the Fukushima accident came. So many governments got hard time because they didn't have much to tell their citizens which were living in Japan. So then it's a Japanese responsibility. You always look also to your own government. And then I think these codes of conduct which are more practical instructions. Here we are again fairly well with the safety and security things. And here IAEA doesn't tell the commitment of the member states, so it's hard to find out where we are with the safety of research reactors. But actually, if you look the ASEAN countries who has them, Indonesia has a few of them, Malaysia has one, Thailand has one, and Vietnam is going to build a bigger one. So they are not that widely distributed yet, but nevertheless, they are there. And then we look the emergencies. So we have basically three types of emergencies. One of those which are actually inside there at the nuclear sites or installations, events which really don't perhaps have an impact to the environment or neighboring countries. They need to be dealt. And it can be on various ways. But the ones which I think that in ASEAN context you are more interested are these radiological events which then go over the borders in the worst case. And again, there are various types of things. There is release from facility radioactivity, like came from Fukushima, or someone has stolen a nuclear radiation source, you don't know where they are, and you need to inform that now there is some sources floating around, we don't know. There are more facility-specific things that people who are working there get additional or overexposure of radiation. All these need to be reported. And then third is this, which is perhaps the most difficult thing to handle, is the question of criminal and unauthorized acts. Very bureaucratic term, but terrorism and or some crazy guy tries to do harm to the other people. And unfortunately, we have not had such a case. But there are a few cases where there has been sabotage in nuclear installations in recent years. And I think that we have been lucky in that sense that none of them hit the critical parts of the nuclear installation, so there was not a very high risk. There was one in Belgium, I think last summer, a year ago, where someone went to do something with the turbo generator and some other similar ones. So it's a kind of symptom that there needs to be more work, because this is an insider job. It's not that someone can send something from outside, and it's also difficult to prepare for that. And now we come then to the preparation. The goal is certainly that, first of all, you need to have your capabilities in place to handle practically any event you can imagine coming from this, either from the installations which you have, or things which come from outside of your national borders. And then you have to be able to respond it. And then these are the things which you need to have. First of all, you need to be which authorities are by whom, responsibilities, organization and staffing, coordination, plans and procedures, tools, equipment, all the gear you need to handle it. You need to train, exercises, and have a management system. This IAEA document is a model for that. And if you go back, for example, to Fukushima, actually there were quite a lot of failures in that response system. Certainly the accident was tremendous. You had several things happening at the same time, and people probably had not thought. First came the earthquake, and actually the nuclear power plants survived that. So they went to the shutdown procedure, get the power down, but then came the huge tsunami which eliminated the electricity. And now your cooling pump stopped working. And fuel started to heat, and then consequently melted. And then when it does that, at the same time it produces hydrogen, which is flammable, and then ended up these explosions and release of the radioactivity. And I think when they were doing their emergency plans, I don't think that they ever thought that all 6 reactors are having a problem at the same time. Because normally your mindset is that one reactor is having a trouble and we handle that. Now you had actually 6 reactors in Fukushima Daiichi, and then 20 kilometers away another 4 reactors in Fukushima Daiichi. So you had to, in this area, to handle multiple accidents. The other thing came there is that all the other infrastructure was also done. So the roads were blocked because of earthquake, bridges were down, oil refineries in fire. So even if you wanted to bring, let's say, additional diesel generators, even though it's not easy to get this big, or to bring additional electricity cables, it became impossible on that short period of time which you have available. Because this was one of the things I learned on this nuclear engineering course. Actually, you have few hours time only. So something like 6 or 10 hours. If you lose the cooling for that period of time, you start to have a fuel meltdown if the reactor was on the full power. So time is of essence here, and I don't think that they had that. And then I also read somewhere that they never really had joint exercise where all the services were at the same time. Police, fire brigade, authorities locally, in prefecture, at the capital, at the power company headquarters, and all the other military, all exercising same time an emergency. They had group here, group there, but not all together. Plus that also I understood, at least from my friends there, that also the emergency center which they had there, they were not able to use it in the beginning because it was not equipped with, for example, with proper filters to clean the air, so they had to do a temporary commando center. So all this need to be tested in advance, drilled, and also prepared to unexpected. So train that some of these essential services are there. What should I do? And then certainly communications, which is missing from that. And then when you have an accident, the first thing is to find out. It's like a fire brigade when they go to fire. Actually, they don't know what is there. They know the place if it's a big industrial complex, but they really don't know what is there. So that's why the boss goes there first, does the evaluation, what is there, then try to contain, get the control of it, contain, start with the saving of lives, minimize the health effects, first aid. These are all logical things to do. And those need all to be trained and keep public informed. And this is informative because then today, I mentioned the other day there was a small release of radioactivity in Finland a year ago. And my friend who is running the regulatory body there, that even though it was a small release of radioactivity, they found out that they had a lot of deficiencies in their system. One was the communication. You know, they had a very good system. They had instructions how to tell to the TV, radio, newspapers, but they forgot the social media, where all kinds of messages went back and forth. They had Facebook, but these other ones, there were things in YouTube and all these ones, and they were not prepared for that. And the other thing which is that you need to prepare also when you go to tell to the public, somehow explain it in a layman terms that what does this now mean? And the easiest thing is you go to tell them it's not Chernobyl. This doesn't satisfy the people because they start to think very big immediately. So this is less than Chernobyl, but Chernobyl was a big thing. So where I am in the scale, so one has to prepare advance this scaling that you don't need to scratch your head, but you have a story or instructions ready from the very beginning to come to the public. And then you need to maintain it. It needs to be updates when the social media is mushrooming around. And then you look the radio logical consequences, what to do with the property, etc. And then you, as soon as possible, you want to go back to the normal activities. Once you have isolated it, people can come back and start to work. So you have to have this one in plans as well, so that people don't need to stay unnecessarily long time away from their normal activities, because this will cause also concerns and hits the public trust. And then you have to have a system, as I mentioned, responsibilities. You need also to synchronize it with the international organizations and IAEA, and the supports which what you have there. You need to do in advance the hazard assessment. You know what you have, where it is, what is the form, and what can happen with that. And when I did this, I also looked this IAEA services like this radiological accident network service, which IAEA has called RANET or RANET. Actually, I noticed that if I'm looking as a Singaporean, actually those services are far away. The closest ones are in South Korea and Japan. So if you want some help physically to come there, can only come tomorrow. They are not like a fire brigade which is ready to fly. So therefore I think it's important to have also national and regional response. If you share something with Indonesia and Malaysia, they for sure are here faster in principle than the Japanese. And then functional requirements, which pretty much is the repetition of those, but it's a little bit more detailed here. And then at one point of time you need also to say that the situation is over. It has to be equally clear-cut as the beginning, otherwise the rumors will spread around and things. Okay, this is straightforward. You do these drills. And then you have to have also a quality aspect on that, which might be surprise to some people, but this is important part of the infrastructure. And then can ASEAN use European community as a model. Actually, this prompted me to look that Ken Jong wrote something about the role of ASEAN in general. And then I think that European system, first of all, in Europe, yes, Europe creates kind of standards which its member states need to be following. But it's not the regulator. It doesn't give the instruction how to do the job. This is just the standards, and it's up to the individual state to implement those instructions. And those instructions are basically to IAEA documentation. There is nothing on top of that. And then, for example, European Union or European Commission is not a regulatory body. And they have no regulatory function there. There is a thing which is called Western European Regulatory Association, or VENDRA. But this is a kind of informal organization between those regulatory bodies. And then they actually advise European Commission. So I think that when I look at what happens in Europe, you must be better off, frankly speaking, taking this whole thing on ASEAN way and look what's the best in this region, taking into account the other cooperations you have in ASEAN. And then, as I said, this just gives the standards, gives some directives to do this, do this, do this, but it doesn't go to verify that they are doing it. And it handles all aspects of, from also nuclear based. There's a lot of cooperation, and this might be something to pick. So they share their research infrastructure and technical research infrastructure. European Commission, okay, they work on the radioactive waste, reactor safety, radiation protection, very scientific research as well, so it's not all just a regulatory type. Looking also use of radiation in medicine and industry, emergency response. Each country has its radiation or national emergency center, but there is no big European one on the top. So they just share the information. I give you a couple of examples. And then they have these joint facilities, and that's something you may think, because like Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand and Malaysia, they have their small nuclear research centers, hopefully with somewhat different capabilities. So is Europe. They have what is called joint research center. There's one in Karlsruhe which is looking, maybe you have, I think that they gave you a lecture on this nuclear forensics, so that's their specialty. Then they do something on radioactive waste. Ispra in Italy, by the way, nice place because it's near these nice lakes, and you may see even George Clooney there because he has his villa in one of those. So they do different kind, they use satellite imagery and this sort of things to support these activities. Then in Sevilla, they are mainly looking actually renewable energies there and not so much nuclear energy. Then in Gale, in Belgium is the Center for Nuclear Material Analysis, and in Petten is the nuclear safety. So, and then those countries like, let's say, Austria, which has no nuclear research center, they can send their scientists and officials to work there for a while and then come back and get the expertise without having those premises, and they are free use for everyone. It comes from a joint budget. I don't think you should go exactly that way, but they have to follow that principle, which we had at one point of time also in Scandinavia, with much less bureaucracy than in the European Union. And in conclusion, it's important, as I said in the beginning, that all the states in this region adhere to these legal instruments, codes of conduct, safety, security, and safeguards. But then they demonstrate in open and transparent way their full compliance with the requirements. This is what is pretty much missing in the picture. IAEA has these peer services. You can invite IAEA to, for example, to check the performance of your regulatory body. but you don't need to tell to anyone else. So nobody else knows how well you are doing. So I think that this is something in the 21st century that we need to get this much more open so that people can demonstrate it. It is on those safety convention review meetings which take every 5 years. So like you have a nuclear safety convention, so the convention parties get together every 5 years. They have their national reports. Some of them are made public, some of them not. But when I look at it, I also found out that there are some countries which have, in my view, quite substantial nuclear activities, and they have not provided any such report in the last 10 or 15 years. So it needs to be, I think, made with a time with a bit more mandatory, and maybe this nuclear security conference can do something to that end. Because you have two things. You show to your neighbors that you do well, but at the same time you can learn from those reports. So it's a two-way street. And there is a lot of experience in the Asia Pacific area, know-how and resources which can be shared with these newcomer states. And those can be shared through the IAEA and particularly in the ASEAN framework. And the most important thing, what I would say, is that be prepared to respond unforeseen events in unforeseen circumstances. Mr. Bubani wrote about black swans. And some of them are not black swans because we knew that those swans were there. But as this next line says, that we didn't pay attention. This is a human nature. So when we do our planning, so we confuse unfamiliar with the improbable. And then we don't think about the consistent contingency. And particularly if the things look strange. And what looks strange is thought to be improbable. And what is improbable is not considered serious. This is written by Thomas Schelling to a book which was analyzed actually Pearl Harbor in the beginning of World War II, when the Americans were taken by surprise. And there's a very good analysis how something happens which was not supposed to happen. And then at the very last thing is success. It's only a result of preparation, hard work, and learning from failure. But we need to be proactive so that we only don't learn through the failures. We do things before they become a problem. Thank you.